hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing. There are hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing. Ooh.
Hi, my name is Deb Maybury, and I'm the host of Reveal, Connect, and Heal. And this evening, my guest is Dr. John Demartini, and John is a behavioral specialist, and he's the creator of the Demartini Institute. And John basically travels the world doing what he loves, which is teaching, speaking, researching, and writing. So, welcome, John.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this interview tonight. And I was kind of kicking myself because you were in Toronto just last week, and I missed an opportunity to attend one of your events.
Well, we had a lovely time there. There's quite a number of events there, so I was very pleased, very grateful to be there.
Okay, great. So I really want to pick your brain tonight. One of the topics that I've been dealing a lot with over the last 2.5 years now is sexual abuse. So some of the answers that you give tonight, if you can sort of direct it in that area, that would be wonderful, or just with trauma in particular.
Right?
So one of the things for myself, I don't know where it came from, but from a young age, I always felt that it wasn't what happened to me that mattered. It was sort of like how I would deal with that. But how do you sell that to somebody who has been violated for years, who has nightmares all the time, and actually has physical damage in their body because of what somebody has done to them?
Well, what I'm about to say is probably going to be shocking for some people who may be watching or listening, but after working with thousands of people in post-traumatic events, and some of them of a sexual nature, I'm certain that today, inside the human mind, when there is a tragedy, a trauma, turmoil, a terrible or traumatic event that hits somebody, they experience, inside their mind will dissociate, and they will simultaneously create a counterpoised state of mind. And inside those dissociative states, they'll create ecstatic, elating, dissociating states to balance it. For instance, we worked with a lady who was being tortured by her dad, and was tied down and was involving a stabbing and a whole bunch of things. And she had been for 34 years in therapy. And nobody asked her at the exact moment when this trauma, tragedy occurred, torture occurred, where was the ecstasy? Where was the other half of the equation? And at first she thought I was absolutely out of my mind asking this question. But what we found out is that the content of the perception of the torture creates a reciprocal content in the fantasy and the dissociative elation or ecstasy in the mind. And the right hemisphere tends to be activated, and there's an area in the brain that basically is used for this purpose when we're having a scary moment or a really painful moment. And we found out that she dissociated from this being tied down and having a stabbing thing. She dissociated by imagining being free and seeing her religious iconography of a child and seeing herself surrounded by what she perceived to be angels, a white light that represented God, a peaceful environment, a safe and protected a symbol of eternity and eternal life. Her mind was perceiving it through her senses, tragedy and near death and loss. But in her psyche, she was creating the opposite, life, eternity, peace, ecstasy, etc. Now, she wasn't aware of this for 34 years.
I was going to say, how did you discover that?
Well, I've been doing this so long that I'm certain about that the human mind maintains what I call quantum equilibrium. It maintains an equanimity at all times. But what happens is we tend to selectively bias our perception and see only one side and completely dissociate from it and create this other side. And as long as we're not aware of it, we tend to run the story of one side and never look at the other. And all I did is ask her to look again. And I had her look again and again. I must have asked her about 10 times before she finally looked and got present. So I had to get her really present in the exact moment as if she was feeling and experiencing the torture again. She didn't want to go there.
No, of course not.
So I had to go back and bring her into that moment because she'd been running the story. And as you know, that when people run a story of a drama, over time, new associations, and it gets elaborated over time and kind of gets distorted and generalized over time, and sometimes put into absolutisms. For instance, a person could have an event where a person is yelling at them, and within a short period of time, they can turn it into, my father always yelled at me, when in fact it was really on a rare occasion and actually 3 times. So it can be distorted. So what happens is in these moments, I have to take her back to the actual experience and not go by the various compounding associations she's made with it and the distortion she makes over time with it, but to actually go back into the moment where she's actually present with the experience. And in that moment, to her discovery, that there was a dissociation. Now, I've worked with about 1,200 cases of rape, and I've never seen a rape case that has been perceived as traumatic, because not all of them do. Mm-hmm. On the ones that are being traumatic, I find this case. So because of that, I asked these questions. Where was the equal and opposite component? And I will sometimes in a rape case, for instance, have them write down all of the different perceptions they have of it. So if they felt violated, if they felt frozen, if they felt threatened, if they felt humiliated, if they felt that they were constrained, if they felt that they were silenced, and everything. We define other content and look at the modalities and submodality distinctions of their perception. And I look for reciprocal opposites. So if it's dark, I look for something light in their psyche. If I see something slow, I look for fast. I look for pairs of opposites in the human psyche. And then with that, we ask them at that exact moment, where was the other side? And if they get really present, it's there. And it's astonishing to have them actually put the puzzle piece together and see that those are actually going on. The moment they actually find this other side, they're startled. They're going, oh my God, I can't believe it. My mind actually wasn't in the moment, in the torture. It was actually dissociated to survive the perception of torture. And I always say that as long as you're perceiving this torture, you'll create this ecstasy to counterbalance it. If you're perceiving constraint, you'll create an image of freedom. If you create darkness, you'll create a light. Many of them report that they're in rape cases, if they're in a dark place, or if they're being constrained and tied down, or these kind of things, they'll perceive themselves in a beautiful field, running free in this field with butterflies and color and light and all kind of stuff there to counterbalance it in the exact moment.
Well, now, that's the thing, though. I mean, people. First off, you're talking about the Demartini method, which of course I'm familiar with, and I understand what you're talking about. But somebody listening to this might say, "You're crazy. How can you find that polar opposite, that wonderful light out of, say, a child who has been violated since the time they're 5? Like, how do you find those moments?"
Well, I tell people that you're not going to rationally assume this until I actually take you through it and experience it. And when you go there, it's in your mind. It's not in my mind. It's in your mind. I don't know what it's going to be. I just know it's going to be a pair of opposites. Because the woman that I'm mentioning that had the stabbing issue, when she felt constrained, they tied her down. and he tied her down. Uh, Whatever represented freedom to her is the image that popped up in her psyche. So through her childhood, all the associations that come in with freedom, the ones that are most appropriate, that are counterbalancing the feeling, are the ones she'll bring into the context and content of the fantasy and association she'll create. And it's really quite intriguing to see these pairs of opposites. I worked with a lady who had just overdosed on heroin because she didn't feel she could go through another raping, but she was 16 years old and, 19 years old. She'd been, the only way she could get heroin was to be raped every day. So she was basically, that was her, she had to have sex with a guy who was much older, very large and obese, that was selling her heroin and got her hooked on heroin. And the only way she could actually get the heroin to survive was to get sexually raped, if you will, and beaten and stuff. And so in those moments of dissociation, we found out that the content of the opposite came from partly from cartoons, partly from religious instruction, partly from childhood experiences in a composite form. Everything that was the counterbalance of what she was perceiving was being compositely put together in the mind. And once I put and constructed it, I had a flip chart. And we did this in front of a group. And we actually had her go through and get all the content of the actual suicidal post-rape experience. And we actually went through and showed what this was. And it blew her mind when she saw this. She goes, I can't believe I wasn't even aware this was going on at the time. And I said, well, you're there. And once I took it and kind of swished them together and collapsed them together, the perception of the trauma and the tragedy just changed, because I put the pairs of opposites together in the mind. And so instead of her perceiving only one half of the equation, it's like a magnet. If you see a negative part of a magnet and there's a positive part, but you don't see the positive part, you're assuming it's a negative event. And if you see the positive part, you think it's a positive event. But you see both of them, you realize it's just a magnet. And it's neither positive nor negative, or neither pain or pleasure, neither good or evil. It just transcends it. And this is not being used in most therapy, primarily because most therapy is based on hedonic and utilitarian. It's for pleasure and happiness. You're trying to get a human in psychology to pleasure and happiness, which is actually part of the problem, in my opinion, in psychology. This hedonic mechanism is defying observation that we find in psychology. We have a thing called hedonic adaptation. The second we seek pleasure, the degree of pleasure from the same stimulus gets less and less and less and less. This is underlying some of the addictive behavior. And we also have desensitization from pain. Painful events, if we see it over and over and over again, it eventually gets less painful. So if we see something and do something, it's less pleasurable and painful, because the mind is trying to equilibrate them and trying to get them back into equilibrium as a stabilizing resiliency factor of the human mind. So instead of waiting for desensitization and hedonic adaptation from pains and pleasures, what I just do is go right to the grease, you might say. I don't pussyfoot around. I get right to it and ask questions that most people aren't willing to ask, because they're afraid the person is going to be pained over the thing or traumatized by it. I've never found that to be the case. I've worked with, like I said, 1,200 rape cases. I did 2 last week. And the lady, and I do probably 2 to 4 incests a week. And I have yet to find that can't be transformed and actually gotten to a point where a person's not run by it. Just not run, but not the story's changed.
Right. Well, it's incredible how many people that you deal with in the breakthrough experience who have been violated. And as you're talking, one of the things that is jumping out in my mind from a lesson that you give is the ABCDs of negativity. Of course, anger, aggression, blame, betrayal. Help me out. Criticism, challenge.
Yeah, and depression, despair, and despair.
Right. So my point is when somebody's been through this, they are often, reliving the story, and they're living the negativity. So I mean, I know your program is very effective, but say somebody's listening to this, what are some of the things that they can do to move out of that negative mindset?
Well, if they run the story to their therapist, which, as you know, spells be rapist. Nothing against therapists, because some of them are really amazingly powerful at what they do, but not all of them. A lot of them are still stuck in um, their own wounds, if you will, and they like to support their wounds by other people with their wounds, with compassion. I don't find that to be the most effective thing. I guess different stages of development need that, but I like to cut right to the grease, and I ask them a simple question. All right, in this moment, you have more resiliency than you give yourself credit for. So in that moment, let's break it down and find out what is exactly going on in the race. Break it down, take it down. I find on average it's between 8 and 18 different things that they will describe the rape as. Again, they'll be threatening me, violated me, humiliated me, deceived me, violent to me, beat me, injured me. There's about 12 to 15 things, 18 things that people have on average. And I break those down, and then I have them go in there and ask outrageous questions, which calms down some of the judgment, because as long as they're highly polarized, they can stay quite irrational, and they want to keep running the story. It's like the loop. They just keep running the story and myelinating the brain. And watching that over the years, the stories get more elaborate. They add stuff to it, and they start putting things in there that weren't even originally there. And so to prevent that and myelinating that, I simply ask them a question. So where have you threatened somebody? And that shocks them. I've never done it, they say, but I found that every human being has every trait. I've never found a person that didn't have a trait. I've taken about 250,000 people through my process, the Demartini method, and I've never seen a case where somebody could say, I point the finger at somebody else without pointing them back at themselves. So we've all threatened somebody, a sister, or brother, or an uncle, or cousin, or mother, or father, or people at school, or an employee, or somebody, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. So I go, where do you threaten? And where have you threatened? And I have them go through and identify where they've done the same action in some form. And I have them keep doing it until they actually register that they've done it quantitatively and qualitatively equal. And at first they always deny that. They always say, no way, no way, no way. But I've done this 250,000 times for 25 years now. 27 years I've been doing this. And I found that there's never a case that they can't own it if they keep looking. They just always stop at their comfort zone, don't want to go there. But what I do is I have them own the trait. And what this does is starts to calm some of the judgment and some of the trauma down, because they're less likely to judge and be traumatized by something that they also have done, because then they'd have to judge themselves. So I go in there and I do that and have them own all the traits. And I have yet to find one that couldn't own them. I mean, I've seen them kick a few times.
It's interesting. I hear you, because you did the same thing with me, because I stopped you in the hall when I was at the Prophecy Experience in Houston, and I said, John, help me out here, because, I mean, I've never violated a child, but you break it up in such a way that you go, okay, well, maybe it wasn't, exactly the same thing, but it is still within that trait.
That's trait. I'm looking for traits. See, we all have every trait, but we do it in a different form. And we judge people for their form, and we don't realize that we have our own form of doing it. So I go in and I have them own the traits. Once they own the traits, a good percentage of the judgment is already calming down, just maybe 10 to 30%. Then now they're able to work a little bit more rationally, because they're very irrational sometimes, particularly if it's very fresh, if it just happened that day. When I do ones that have just occurred and they're still shaking, they've been shot at and they've been raped or whatever, they're really shaking, they're sitting in shock. I've actually taken them right out of the shock and calmed them down and put them right into function again. And so in that moment, once we own those traits, I then go in there and identify what's the benefit. Nobody ever asks them that. And they're just like, I can't believe they don't ask them that question, because it's never what happens to you, it's what you decide to do with it and how you perceive it. So I ask them, because William James said that the father of modern psychology said it's not what happens to us, it's our perception of it. It's never, so we got to own the perception, because two people will look at it differently, and it's their perception. So then I go, and I've asked people, as strange as this may be, and it may sound really kind of odd, but I've asked if there was if George Clooney was doing that activity, would it be as bad? And they go, oh well, no. If it was him, it wouldn't be perceived the same. So I kind of lighten it up by that.
Yeah, but you got to be careful on that one because I mean we can laugh about that, but I mean that's not the same thing as your father
No.
violating you for 15 years, right?
No. But I've got the, I've got probably the most difficult case. I don't know if I think I've showed it to you. The woman that was raped by her father for many, many years, and he finally went to prison for 58 years and died in prison. I don't know if I've shown you this story.
I think you talked to me about it. Yeah, go ahead and share.
Well, she was raped by 7 people in her life. Her father was the first one. She was kept enclosed in in a basement of a thing for many, many years, held by her dad. It wasn't allowed to leave. And one day she got out, and she got raped by other guys the day she got out of the house. I mean, it's a very amazing story. It was one of the biggest cases in Ireland. And today she's an empowered woman traveling the world and writing 3 books and empowering women around the world. So after we dissolved it all, we cleared it all. Now you couldn't get her to even perceive trauma. But we first go in there and own the traits. The second thing is we go in there and ask the benefits. And they never ask that. And their therapists never ask that. They just assume it's evil, terrible, wrong, evil, terrible, bad, And so that just traumatizes them further because now they're caught. So I just tell them, what's the benefit side? And to their surprise, with some asking questions to help them, they find them. I mean, I'm amazed at what they can find. And as they do, they're already calming down the trauma because it's not what happened. It's how they chose to see it. And if they see the other side to it, they're already starting to calm down the trauma.
Well, it's the reaction of the people around you as well. But what I've found, and I have actually started to apply that in facilitating and tried to find what the benefits would be, and that's a tough one to ask. You want to build some rapport before you get into that area, but
I don't have
did that with myself.
I just go right to the juggler and do it because they thank me. It's over with. When I'm done, they thank me. So I don't pussyfoot around.
I know you don't.
Because I've been doing this so long. If you do this 27 years and you've taken as many cases, you just get in there and get the job done. You don't sit there and pussyfoot around and share. A lot of people who are wounded specialize in the wounds they have, and because they're still wounded and they haven't cleared their own, they sympathize and compassionately sympathize with these people and keep them stuck with them. And then they run this story instead of getting over it. Both of them get over it. So, because we have resilience, incredible resilience that we don't give ourselves credit for,
sure.
And we just have suppressed our resilience, and we've made a friggin' empire out of wounded people.
Exactly, and that falls into another thing that I wanted to ask you, having to do with worthiness. I mean, you're in Unlock the Door, the chapter in Unlock the Door, and the last thing I asked you was to give a quote, and you gave the quote about everybody is worthy, that piece. And a lot of the times when people have gone through this, they don't feel worthy. They feel completely unloved. They don't understand love. I mean, how do people access that part of themselves to know that they are worthy of love?
The second they balance it all out, they feel it again. They feel love for themselves. I worked with a lady who was, I was being interviewed in South Africa recently. And there's a woman there that was talking about stresses. And she was doing it for a magazine. And I said that stress is just an imbalanced perspective. And it's the fear of loss of that which you infatuate with and attach to, and a fear of gain of that which you resent and try to run away from. I said, and if you know how to ask the right question, you can take any stress. I mean, I dissolve stress every day with people. And she said, well, what about a rape case? And I said, what about it? And she said, what about that? That's super stressful. I said, if you choose to make it so, it is. But you can make it like this. So all of a sudden, I said, obviously you've been raped or whatever. You wouldn't have brought it up. So why don't we do it right now? Instead of me talking about it and theorizing about it, why don't we just friggin' do it? So right in the hotel, in the lobby, we did it.
How long? I mean, your breakthrough experiences, they're 2 days, they're on weekends. Maybe explain a little bit about that and what people could expect going to one of your workshops and how long it actually takes to
Well,
dissolve some of these
I
traumas?
dissolved this. I spent 45 minutes dissolving some of this, and then I got another about an hour, so about 2 hours with her total, about 2 hours. Uh, and then she came to the breakthrough experience that weekend and worked on something totally different. We cleared it in 2 hours. It's surprising her. She was shocked. She said, "You know, you just screwed up my entire article." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because my article, I can't write the same article. You just screwed up my entire story." I said, "Great." I said, "You're going to put out another story that's going to perpetuate this myth again." And I said, "Great. Let's educate people about new possibilities, because there's no reason to have to sit there and be stuck in this thing for years. It's not because of the trauma that you're stuck. It's stuck because you've chosen to be stuck and you haven't asked the right questions. You ask a new set of questions, you get a new life. And I'm interested in breaking people through and getting broken through. And in the breakthrough experience, I spend 2 days with them, but I make them do it. I don't do it always. They do it. I want them to know how to do it, so when they leave here, if they're ever traumatized, they know how to do it themselves. So I can do it a lot quicker. I took her 2 hours. I did the thing. But when they work in the breakthrough experience, they're going to work on their own. It's a little slower because they're having to learn as they go. But I've worked with cases in 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. In some cases, some are fresh. Some happened the night before. Sometimes there's shame and guilt because they felt like they were put in a situation where they were vulnerable. They were hung out in an area that was vulnerable. They hung out with a group of people that were vulnerable. You know, they put themselves in that situation. They're feeling guilty about it. And a lot of them are basically, not knowing how to process it because nobody's educated them on it. You go, oh, I go to the therapist and they say, well, this could take years or whatever. I think that's, to me, almost barbaric. I think that's unfair to people to promote that kind of stuff. I think that if you know what you're doing, you get the job done and get this thing transformed. So I go in there and I have them stack up the benefits. And to their surprise, I had a case where I did it in front of 600 people. We had a volunteer that had been raped in front of 600 people in the High Valley Ranch at a seminar there, and volunteered. I said, let's go. Put her up on stage, got a flip chart, went to work. And this was a stabbing, 18 stabbings in the back, hit over the head with a bottle, knocked unconscious, left on a highway to be run over, and raped. Okay, that's a pretty good one. And, in 48 minutes, that's one of the fastest I've ever done. In 48 minutes, this lady processed this. It was the most amazing thing. And I saw her 2 years later. She lost about 45 pounds. Her hair was ratty when I first met her, and covering her face and protecting herself from men. She'd lost 48 pounds. Her hair was all slicked back. She had femininity back again. She was on a roll. She was doing a radio show. We did a radio show together 2 years later. Totally different lady. And she tells her story. She says, that was a catalyst for me to go on and do something amazing with my life. I said, well, you don't have to make it a trauma and keep it a trauma. You can turn it into an opportunity. It's up to you. All I know is I've got a tool that can do it. You just got to have the willingness to do it. But if you get wrapped into running your story and keep getting secondary gains out of playing the story and running the story and protecting yourself with it, well, then that's okay too. That's your business. But it's not. It doesn't have to be that way. Not with the tools we have today.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that, John. Just one more question. We're just getting right near the end of the time. Why is, I know you don't call it sexual abuse, why is this victimization so prevalent?
Because we're teaching fantasies in our psychology, in my opinion. We're teaching people they're supposed to be happy, never sad, always kind, never cruel, always give, never take, always support, never challenge, always positive, never negative, peace, never war, generous, no stingy. This lopsided fantasy world that people keep promoting is crap. It's not true. When I looked, I went through the Oxford Dictionary many years ago, and I went through, this is a big dictionary, thin paper, the big one. And I went through and circled every possible human behavioral trait that a person could live. And, starting from A all the way to Z. And I circled them, and then I thought, I put outside the margin, who do I know that's the most extreme example of that I've ever met or read about? I put their name there and initials there. And then I went in there and I go, where and when do I demonstrate that trait? And when do I demonstrate that trait? So I started stacking all the memories of when I demonstrated that trait. And I kept doing it until I owned the trait as much as I saw in the most extreme example. And most people aren't willing to look at themselves honestly like this, but I looked deep. And I went in there and I found out that I had 4,628 identifiable traits to the same degree as the most extreme examples I've seen. So when I got through with that, I was really humbled. I sat there and I saw things I admired and things I disliked. And then I went in there and asked, if I disliked a trait, if it's on the planet, it must serve or it would have gone extinct. So it must serve evolution or it would have gone extinct because it would not be energy usage. The energy our bodies use for a purpose, we don't understand the purpose of it maybe, and so we think it's bad, but then we eventually discover it's got a benefit side. So I went in there and I found out what were the benefits of me demonstrating those traits. How did it serve people? How did it serve me? So I went in there and owned 4,628 traits. I was honest and dishonest and kind and cruel and giving and taking and positive and negative and supportive and challenging and integral and deceitful. I had done every one of those things in my life. You know, I don't hide it. I'm not trying to get rid of half of myself to love myself. I'm not trying to be a one-sided person and then living in this fantasy world that, black and white and trying to get rid of half of me and only be one-sided. That's a bipolar condition that results in that. So I basically, I owned all the traits. And when I did, I went, my God, I have everything. No matter what anybody says about me, it's true in some form or fashion. That was a breakthrough for me. That's when I started asking questions about other people and started putting people through some of these exercises. And to their surprise, they had them too. When you do 250,000 people this way, and I have 3,000 facilitators around the world doing this, so there's now way more than 250,000 people doing this, or involved in this. It's there. So when I own those traits, I realized they served a purpose. My job is to find out what the purpose was and how they could be used and how they benefited me. Just like I take the ABCDs of negativity, I discovered that everybody is wanting to get rid of and pop rubber bands and get rid of those things and cancel that crap. I found that every one of those traits served me because I have found out that every time I ever had those things, I had an unrealistic expectation. I expected somebody to live in my values, or I expected myself to live in other people's values, or I had this imbalanced fantasy about how life is supposed to be every time I had those. And once I put realistic expectations in place and got balanced, they disappeared. The ABCDs of negativity didn't need to be there. So I realized that they were there as a gift to me to let me know that I'm setting unrealistic expectations on the universe or on people or on myself or on objects. And once I got balanced on that and set realistic expectations, I didn't find myself having these highly polarized states. I didn't get all manic and elated, and I didn't get all angered and depressed. I stabilized myself, and I had self-governance. And so I'm teaching people how to have self-governance and self-mastery, because your self-worth goes skyrocketing the moment you do, and you appreciate yourself, and you're not worried about what people think about you, because, a lot of people sit there and subordinate to the influence of other people, and they basically shroud and cloud their magnificence, and they don't appreciate themselves because they're comparing themselves to other people and expecting to live in other people's values. This is a sure way to depreciate yourself. I'm trying to help people look in the mirror and say, thank you, I love you. Thank you for being magnificent. I have something uniqueness I'm here to bring to the world. No matter what I've done or not done, I'm ultimately really, truly worthy of love. If I had the last 24 hours of my life, it'd be trivial. All my judgments is trivial. I ultimately here to love and appreciate life and myself and the people around me, and to learn to appreciate people. I say that that's the essence of our soul, even though it may transcend the existence of our senses. So I believe that that's what we're here for. I believe that I've been building a method on how to do that, and I feel I've created that, and I feel that it deserves to be in people's hands. What they do with it, it's up to them, but at least be exposed to it, so they don't have to sit there and carry and run stories for years and decades possibly over something that all they have to do is ask the right questions and clear it. Because the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. If you ask amazing questions, you're going to have an amazing life. Just got to know how to ask the right ones.
Well, John, certainly a pleasure to speak with you again today. I don't want to be respectful of your time. I could just ask you another question and let you talk for another 2 hours. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I think it is so critical when people have gone through these types of experiences that they take on a different perception. And I think that we can bang our head against the wall with the same story and over again, and it doesn't serve us or anybody around us. So I really appreciate you
Can I
sharing
share
your
one more
thoughts.
story? Can I share one more thing?
Absolutely, please.
I was asked when I was doing programs in Ireland, in Dublin, I met with Martin McAleese, and the president's husband from Ireland. I went to the White House there, their green White House, if you will. And we had a discussion about the issues that they were facing dealing with the conflict between Northern and Southern Ireland. And so they gave me an opportunity to go up and do a kind of a pilot study up in Belfast. So we drove from Dublin to Belfast and went up there and met with 60 people in a room. And so imagine this. I have 6 women in the room who have a few children left, but their sons or husbands were killed by opposition. And I had also the 6 killers in the room. So I have 6 killers and 6 people that had their family killed in a room. Okay, this is a good one.
I'm sure it is.
And I had a bunch of nuns, because the nuns are working with the women, some psychologists, people from the government, a representative from the White House, and some other people that I didn't even get to know that well, all gathered around at this event. And they gave me a day to see what I could do to transform these people's lives. One of the ladies there was a kind of a poster child for being a victim. Had been all over the news, all over the television. Her story was famous, and she was making basically a living out of it, I think. And so anyway, I took her through the Demartini method. I took them all through it. They all had to do it, including the killers. They had to do it on themselves, and the other ones had to do it on the killers and on the event. And then I got to do my grief process. You see my grief process. It's mind-blowing. I mean, I've done that in I don't even know how many cases now. I do it every single weekend. It works every time. It's mind-blowing. And so I had them go through and first dissolve the anger of them killing their husbands and their children. And then I had one of the ladies, the final one, I had about the last hour and a half, I got to do the grief on the death of the husband up in front of the whole group. When she got through, and you've seen it in the breakthrough experience, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
When she got through, she was in tears, not out of sorrow, out of gratitude. Walked over to the guy that killed her husband and put her arm around that guy and hugged him in front of this entire room. There was not one dry eye in there, except one lady who was a psychologist, was afraid to lose her job because I just screwed up her whole psychology. Because she was basically promoting victims and keeping it active. Martin McAleese, the head of the president's husband, Mary, said, this victim mentality is stirring up our nation. We've got to transcend it. We need new models. This thing is keeping people active, and the next generation just going on and on and on in victimization. So anyway, I offered it to him. But boy, the politics has stirred up that stirred up. Because if you go in there and you dissolve an issue and they're all of a sudden embracing each other, this woman hugged this man. They killed her husband and son. And it was a tear-jerking moment. And he was a pussycat, tattooed and everything. He was pussycat. She was in that room, taught people how to love. Because the past is over now. Let's now go forward. And it was amazing watching this room, people transform. And they interviewed and kind of asked the ladies about their experience, and they just said, we're speechless. But the politics of this stopped it. The church is threatened by it. Psychologists are threatened by it unless they do it. I even offered them to be trained and to let them be the leaders of this new method. They were frightened. They couldn't wrap their head around it because they're frightened about, even though they saw it, it still scared them because their entire foundation of their entire career is undermined. We're promoting victimization in our society. It's on television. It's in the newspapers. It's everywhere. It's great for mass consciousness. See, everybody lives by a set of priorities, a set of values. When they live by their highest value, they're resilient. They're congruent. They're authentic. They're integral. And they're completely able to handle pleasure and pain equally in the pursuit of what's meaningful to them. But whenever they're not fulfilling their highest values, they become more and more and more and more immediate gratifying, looking for a pleasure over a pain, and which is the catalyst for compulsive addictive behavior. When they do, the more they seek pleasure and try to avoid pain, and the more animalistic and passionate, looking for pleasure and avoiding pain. They look for prey to eat. They look to avoid the predator. And so the entire model of prey and predator, and innocent and victim and perpetrator, that entire model is an animal psychology behavior, not an angelic level that we're capable of living. And so I'm interested in transcending that and coming from a different perspective. And I'm not saying that lightly. You know I do this every week, and I deliver the goods. So I'm interested in helping people get that information, because I've seen post-traumatic stress and rapes and incest and all that stuff transformed in one weekend and in one-on-one consults in 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour. So, and I mean repeatedly. I just was in Auckland, New Zealand the other day, and we did a lady there that just lost a young man in her life, and was shocked by it, was distraught by it. We cleared it. Took an hour and about 15 minutes. And then we had the guy, I didn't realize it, but the guy that I had done last year there was there, who'd lost his grandfather, who raised him, who was like a father figure, and who died. And he got up and he did a testimony. He said, look, since I did this last year, I haven't had any grief, I haven't had any issue. I got on with my life. I'm grateful. And I feel the presence of love for my grandfather right now. I don't feel a loss. And I always tell people that if you're having grief and loss, it's because you're still addicted to parts of the person that you're infatuated with, and you're blocked in love. And people can't fathom that, because they're thinking love is the pleasure side. They don't understand that love is pain and pleasure, true love. And so in the process of doing that, I transcend that, and I've seen this repeatedly done, and I'm just going to keep plowing away. You know, I'm like a workhorse. I do it day after day after day until we get a new paradigm out there. And slowly but surely, we're getting there. We're making progress. We got a grief counseling company now that's wanting to find out about it. We've got one in New Zealand that's doing it. Slowly but surely, we've got a police department that's now looking at it. So we just keep plugging away until all of a sudden enough people hit critical mass. And they go, okay, we have a new paradigm born. So people who are listening there, if you don't believe this and you think I'm outrageous or whatever it is, don't judge it till you actually experience it. That's the best advice I can say, because I mean, you've seen it. I've done this every day. I do it week after week after week, and I'm just going to keep doing it until people get a hold of it, because it could save a person's life. I know people that are literally taking their lives because they don't know how to process stuff, and they end up on medications the rest of their life, and they don't know how to do it, and they end up dissociating with schizophrenic behavior and dissociative disorders. They don't need to. There's a way of dealing with it. So,
well, I think it's wonderful that you're providing another option for people. I know when I'm sitting here listening to you, you're reminding me of what I had gone through in the breakthrough experience, and it's for people listening. I mean, you just have to go and experience it, because we can sit and talk about, you know, ending up in love and gratitude, and yet you can't believe it until you actually.
I had a guy in Perth, Australia, a couple weeks ago. Let's see, almost 3 weeks ago. Well, this weekend will be 3 weeks ago in Perth. No, pardon me. Maybe 5 weeks ago, pardon me. But this guy stood up in the program, and he just started lambasting me and just screaming at me. His father used to beat him. His father used to torture him. It was just, his mom and dad used to have sex in front of him and forced him to sit and watch. I mean, all kind of crazy stuff. And he was basically just screaming at me. And I walked over to him, got right in his face, and I said, listen, I said, you can do this if you want, and you can run out of here, but I'm offering you something that I'll guarantee a result if you follow my instructions. So you can rant and rave, because what you're doing is you've been running a story. You're 48 years old. You've been running a story since you're 12 years old. So this is 30, whatever it is, something years, almost. And you've been writing a story. If you want to do that, fine. That's fine. You can leave. You can yell at me all you want. It's not going to sway me, because I've been doing this too long, and I know my business. And so you can stand up, you can fight with me, you can slap me. I've had a woman scrape her nails across my face before and bleed in my face. But I got her through it, and she broke through, and she's grateful after that. I had to deal with that a little bit. But I don't care. I want the result. And this guy he went back to work. He finished the next morning. He didn't finish Saturday night because he was slow. He was fighting it. But my facilitator went out there and worked with him till 10:30 in the morning. At 10:30 in the morning, the guy came in there and hugged me. Right in the middle of the room, right in the front of the class. He came up there and he just cried and bawled. I said, I was your father, wasn't I? He said, you were my father, and that's why I hated you. I was yelling at you. You were my father. I said, great. I did my job. And he said, no, I want to thank you for saying what you said and making me stay there and having that facilitator get me through this thing. I cannot tell you how much I love my father right now. I just want to hug you. And I had another guy who was 42 years of not seeing his father, who had used to hit him with baseball bats. 42 years, he went to the breakthrough. 3 days afterwards, he went to see his father and embraced his father and told him he loved him. His father died 3 days after that. And he told me, he says, I cannot tell you how much it's a relief to know I got to share my love to him before he died. And I had a guy in L.A. who was, his father used to beat him. He used to hide under a bunk bed, hit him with a baseball bat, and forced him to be his mother because his mother died. And so the father made him the mother and had to cook and clean and do everything when he was starting at age 4. And used to beat him if he didn't do what he was told. And they used to have sex in front of him also, same thing. This kid was shut down, almost catatonic. I mean, he was probably, I say kid, he's 30s. I mean, he was just shut down. He still was a child in his 30s. And I asked him, I said, so what's the benefit? This guy was not going to go there. He was blank, no benefit, no benefit, no benefit. I mean, we worked and worked and worked. This guy was not going there. He was so bitter, so angry. He would stab his father if he saw him. We finally got him on Sunday, on the second day of Breakthrough. And what got him was, I asked him, what does he do for a living today? He said, I create visual animations for Disney. And I said, and where did you learn to do animation? Under the bunk bed, my mind dissociated from the trauma and created fantasy worlds. And I've never lost my ability to create those fantasy worlds for kids. He broke down in tears and loved his father because he said, your entire career of making children inspired for millions of children around the world came from your dad. He never saw it. He put the two together. That broke him through. So all I say is,
me goosebumps everywhere for sure. You know, the work isn't easy. Anybody listening to this, the work is not easy. You're in there and you're in process for a long time, but it is certainly worth it.
I can tell you, you're right. Thank you for saying it. It's not easy, but you know what? It's easier than carrying your story all your life.
Yes.
And a few hours of having to deal with me is nothing compared to carrying that torturous life for God knows how many decades, some cases.
That's right. You know what? It's actually quite pleasurable to be in one of your courses. I must say, when I had the idea to write Unlock the Door Beyond Sexual Abuse, I grabbed my little black book from behind me on my bed, and I wrote down, Dr. John Demartini, the love gratitude guy. I have to talk to him about forgiveness and all this kind of stuff, and it's turned into, I love speaking to you. It's more like you're a friend. I can just talk to you forever.
Well, I was doing a talk in Nashville, Tennessee, at a Unity church, and the minister was speaking and doing a sermon for 20 minutes before I was the guest speaker that night, and she said how important forgiveness was, and I got up and did a 2-hour dissertation on the illusion of forgiveness.
You would.
And I'm telling you, she was receptive. She was like a savvy lady. And she came to the Breakthrough Experience that weekend. That was a Wednesday night, and I was in Nashville all the way through the weekend. She was there, and she brought her mother there. Now, her husband was an alcoholic, a womanizer, right? You know, he's always messing around, and did some drugs, did alcohol, but got her pregnant. So she had an out-of-wedlock pregnancy, and but her mother was a minister and kind of a holier-than-thou woman. So, and a founder of the whole religious group, which is interesting. So they both come to the Breakthrough Experience and do the guy that's the ex-husband, because he left him. And they both hated the guy. You know, he was a loser, a drunk. They had to fight him to get the kid, and it was just an amazing thing. When they got through, they both loved him, and they both appreciate him. because when they saw all the gifts that had come out of that, and all the lessons and all the sermons and all the benefits that came out of it, they were grateful. And afterwards, the elderly woman who was in her 80s came up to me and she says, I've been teaching at this Unity Village for many, many years, and I've been teaching forgiveness because I haven't seen anything other than that. She said, but right now, I realize that all these years that I thought I'd forgiven somebody, right now, there's nothing there to forgive. I'm actually grateful. And I said, now we've got to the truth. Because forgiveness is a form of self-righteousness, projecting your values onto somebody else and expecting them to live in your values. It's an assumption that that person caused you a pain or a loss or a negative without a positive and a gain and a pleasure. And it's an assumption that there's not, that if it had not happened, life would have been somehow fantasy better. And it's a whole bunch of assumptions that aren't true. And when I actually get through the method, there's nothing there except thank you. I always say no therapy is ever complete until you can say thank you, I love you.
Wow. Well, on that note,
anything less than that is incomplete.
Forgiveness is such a huge factor in this
I
area.
know it's a multi-billion-dollar business.
I don't even like the word. I understand the concept of it, but to me, it's when you can come to a place where you actually accept what happened and then see various sides of it.
Because acceptance still assumes there was something to accept. I go all the way to say thank you. The only time I use the word forgiveness is thank you for giving me this experience.
Oh, that's true too, eh? The word guy. Well, listen, John, thank you so much for taking the time and being a part of Reveal, Connect, and Heal. And
can I just say, I know I'm being commercial here, but if anybody in any way would like to, they can tolerate me out there because they're probably going to think I'm whatever.
Maybe.
But if they are interested in any way of knowing anything about what I'm doing or the breakthrough experience or the method or whatever, please have them go to my website, drdemartini.com, because there's a vast amount of educational information on there. It's free for people, radio and television and all kind of things, and magazines and articles and products and all kind of stuff. And just, they might have somebody that might be having problems getting through stuff, and coming to the breakthrough experience just might save their life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'll scroll that down at the end of this video as well to make it easy for people to find that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time once again. And you
Thank
take
you.
care. And I've since I didn't see you in Toronto this time, I'm definitely going to find out when you're here again and see you live. Or maybe I'll go to maybe Australia. You're in Australia a lot. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll come and see you there sometime.
I'm going to be in Calgary in a couple of weeks. I'm here in Houston for the next 2 weeks, and then I go to Calgary. Then I'll be in Denver, Dallas, and then I'm off to Tokyo, and then back to Africa and Australia.
Wow, you sure get around a lot. That's wonderful.
I move around. I'm nomadic. I'm a homeless guy.
Still.
Still homeless.
Okay, well, again, thanks so much, John. And
Thank
enjoy
you.
your fashion show this tonight with your daughter.
Yeah, well, she's getting to be an amazing fashion designer, so she was looking for an investor, and I definitely invested in what she's doing. She's doing amazing stuff.
That's wonderful. Okay, you take care. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
There are hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing. There are hopes and treasures beyond your broken wing. Ooh, beyond your